Everybody, this is Steven. Today I want to talk to you about Marvel Legends for a change. Been talking a lot about DC lately. So the Marvel Legends I'm going to be covering today is the ones done by Hasbro, and it's one of their latest waves based on the upcoming movie Thor Ragnarok, which will be part 3 of the trilogy about Thor from Marvel Comics. So this will be Marvel Legends Thor Ragnarok wave with build a piece to build Gladiator Hulk from the movie, where he will also show up in. Now, some of the characters in this wave do not show up in the movie, some do, and some are based on the comic book and some are based on the movie. So it's a mix of characters. There is 6 of them in total. Out of those 6 I have 4, so I'm still missing 2. Now, out of those particular ones, what you have in this wave is a movie Thor from part 3 and Loki from part 3, and of course Build-A-Figure Hulk from part 3, dressed up as Gladiator. And then we have Hela, the goddess of the underworld in Asgardian mythology, based on the movie, and she pretty much looks the same in the comics as well. And then we also have Ares, the Greek god of war, but he's made more of as a warrior in Marvel Comics. And then we have Thor without his hammer, because in some of the latest stories he was made that he does not deserve to wield the hammer any longer. And of course the final character would be Jane Foster, Thor's girlfriend on Earth. And for some unknown reason, because I did not read that story, she's the one who is now worthy to wield the hammer. Not really sure that I understand the reason behind it, but okay, because she's not of Asgard origin, she's just an ordinary human from Earth. Anyway, I'll just show you the ones that I have, and I'll talk a bit about them. So I will start with Thor, the Unworthy Thor, I would call him. And this is how he looks. Now, of course, this hammer he has, it is Thor's hammer, but he does not come with this hammer. I decided to just put it for him because he looks awkward when he's not wielding one. So I decided to just give him an extra one I have from one of the other Thors. And that way he looks more complete, I think. He does come with one particular weapon, which is this battle axe. That's the only weapon he wields with this particular figure. And the axe is very well done, I suppose. It's nicely molded and has some detail. The articulation of this particular Thor is pretty much what you would expect in these new Marvel Legends. There is articulation in the hands, in the wrists. The hand can move forward and backward, and then there is a movement in the elbows, and then the biceps swivel. The head can move left and right. It comes with a very damaged, battle damaged cape, because it has thorns all over it, and he can do a split. He has also articulation in the ankles and the ankle pivot, and in the knees, and in his legs as well. He can turn the leg left to right, and he can move legs forward and backward. And there is an ab crunch, so he can move forward this much, and he can move backward a bit as well to make him stand really straight. And he also has movement in the waist. Now, this particular health sculpt he has is actually the same sculpt that you've seen in one of the other figures, also from Marvel Legends. So I believe it's just a reused head sculpt with some minor modifications of the character called Sentry. And Sentry is a character from Marvel Comics who in many ways resembles Superman, but of course he's not wearing the same costume and he does not have the same colors as well. But more about Sentry in another video. So this is as far as the Unworthy Thor goes, and he did come with one of the body pieces to build the Hulk. So that's him. The next one in the lineup would be Ares, the god of war in Greek mythology, and this is how Marvel represents him in the comics. He is known to be an enemy of Thor in the comics, and he did not have any movie appearances so far. It's also interesting to note that the enemy of Wonder Woman is also Ares, god of war, but he's represented as a completely different figure altogether, and he looks different. You could probably take a look at how that particular one looks like in one of my older videos where I talk about the vintage DC Direct figures, where I also mention the DC version of God of War. Now, this particular Ares is quite a tall figure, I think a bit over 6 inches. He comes with the Greek-style helmet, which is removable, and you can see his human face underneath. And this is how the helmet looks like. It's a typical Greek style, I believe, Corinthian type of warrior helmet, and very nicely done and very detailed, and the colors look good. So you can display him with or without the helmet. Of course, he looks a lot better with the helmet. He came with actually three weapons. He came with this battle axe, and it's the same type of axe that one of the Thors came with in the early figures of Marvel Legends made by Hasbro years ago, around 2007. I believe in wave 2 or 3 of the early Hasbro Marvel Legends. There was a Thor in that particular wave that wielded the same kind of axe except repainted. Now, Ares here did saw a release before in the early Marvel Legends by Hasbro, and he was available as Build-A-Figure. Now, of course, I don't have that particular version, but they're almost identical except for the accessories and some of the color scheme. The other one also had a removable helmet, and the head sculpt looked pretty much the same. His other weapon that he comes with is this enormous sword with a huge blade. It's a very big sword, and aside from that, he also comes with a smaller sword, I would say, or even you can consider it maybe a dagger, but I would probably say it's a sword. It's this one right here. It looks like a dagger, but it also in some way resembles a gladius short sword used by the Romans. Now, of course, it wouldn't make sense that a Greek would use Roman weapons, but I'm just saying the style of it resembles the short sword of the Roman legions, called gladius. So, but I guess you could also consider it to be just a simple blade or a dagger as well. So Ares here is loaded with weapons, and of course with the removable helmet, so there is quite a bit of pieces to him. And Ares was also a member of the Dark Avengers in the comic books. Now, who are the Dark Avengers? They were sort of a new style of Avengers that was organized by Norman Osborn, who is just his identity, because his real identity was Green Goblin. So Norman Osborn, aka Green Goblin, organized at one point in one of the Marvel stories, he organized the Dark Avengers in order to get trust of the people and the government, and the members of his Avengers were supposed to equal the original Avengers. So Ares was selected to join in and to reflect an equivalent of Thor, because Ares here also has the strength and the stamina and all that sort of thing, and in many ways he was an equal. to Thor. And then of course there was a Hawkeye in there, a darker version of Hawkeye, which I believe was represented by Bullseye or somebody else wearing the same classic costume of Hawkeye. And then Norman Osborn himself was not dressed up as a Green Goblin, but he had a very similar armor to Iron Man's. And he was calling himself Iron Patriot, I believe. His armor was was almost identical to Iron Man's, except it was colored to, in a way, resemble sort of an American flag, I guess, in a way. And there were several other members. There was also Daken or Daken, I'm not sure the exact pronunciation of the name, which was supposed to be a son of Wolverine, who wore the exact same costume as his father. And there were a few other members, but I cannot remember all of them at the moment. But anyway, I mentioned a few. Now going back to the figure here, he comes with an engraved or printed on skull with the two crossed swords. He has a very detailed belt. He has a holster for the dagger, or if you want to call it a short sword. He has armored boots, and he has a great deal of detail, especially at the back here, in regards to his armor. Now, of course, he does not have any removable armor. His body is just made in such a way that the armor is actually sculpted on, so it cannot be removed. And I will show you now how the two of them, meaning Thor and Ares, look side by side. Now, of course, in this aspect, Ares look much taller than Thor, but I have some other versions of Thor that would probably be just the right size. But anyway, as far as this wave goes, this is the difference. Now going to the females of this wave, we will start with the female Thor, Oryx or Jane Foster, who became the new Thor. She's wielding the Thor of hammer, the Thor's hammer, and she is wearing a costume that in many ways resembles Thor's costume, except for the fact that she has a cover for her face, a metal cover, and there is some differences of her costume because it's supposed to be for a woman. But she also has a red cape just like Thor, same type of hammer, and the cape is removable, so this is how she looks without it. She also has a sort of a semi-skirt sculpted on her, and that cannot be removed. Now she can move her legs forward and a bit back, well, not quite backward due to the fact that the skirt, which is made of harder plastic, is stopping the movement of the legs if you want to put them backwards. The same thing could be said about her trying to do a split. The skirt goes all the way around, so it sort of impedes any movement on the side. But she does have the usual type of articulation, such as ankle pivot, the knees, and the leg itself is able to move and rotate. The arms can also move the same way, that she has movements in the elbow and also bicep swivel, and in the shoulders as well. And she can move her arm up and down, left to right, and her wrists can also move as well. And there is just a hole attachment at the back here where you would pin her cape. She also has movement in the head, which can move left and right, and a little bit down as well. Now, the hair is sculpted on, so of course, again, that will cause an additional problem with the movement of the head. And also, She has movement in her waist as well. And in her waist as well, she can move left to right. In her upper body, she can move left to right. And she has a bit of an ab crunch as well. Aside from that, that's the confusing part. Why? Because I didn't read the story, that's why I don't really know, but I'm curious. Why was she selected to become the new Thor, knowing the fact that her background is that she's from Earth, and she, for the most part of the comic book stories about Thor, she worked as a healthcare worker, as a nurse, to be specific. And in the old days, when Thor actually had the secret identity, which I believe does not exist in the newer comics anymore, he had the secret identity of being Dr. Blake as his secret identity while he's on Earth, and he would also carry a wooden stick, walking stick, and when he hits it on the ground, he can transform into Thor. His only love interest on Earth was Jane Foster, and she remained so for many years to come. She was there for him. Now, on the other hand, she also showed up in some of the movies, especially Thor Part 1 and 2. Her character did show up, but of course she's not a Thor in any of them. They kept her part as in the old comics, that she's just a love interest to Thor. And aside from that, she did have appearance in the Lego Marvel Avengers game, and she shows up there looking exactly the same as here. She's actually wearing her armor and wielding a hammer as being a new female Thor. And she is not to be mistaken with another female Thor, or Thor girl, I believe, who is a completely separate character from her, and their costumes do not really look the same. But she did have an appearance. This particular female Thor did have an appearance in the not wearing this costume, but in her civilian looks as a nurse. Did show up in the Avengers: The World's Mightiest Heroes in season 1 and 2 of that show. She was shown on Earth where practically acting as a nurse. There was never any mention that she will become a new Thor or anything like that. Now in the newer comics, yes, she becomes the new Thor for the reasons which I'm not sure what they are. As I said, due to the fact I didn't read the story, but there were certain other characters that kind of became the new Avengers as well. So there is a Miss Marvel who has nothing to do with the most present Miss Marvel, and she's called, she is actually a younger woman of Pakistani origin, and she became the new Miss Marvel in a completely new costume, and she's kind of like a mix of Miss Marvel and Mr. Fantastic, because her body can stretch, and she can also become large just like Giant Man, so I'm not really sure what that character is all about. I know very little about her, but other members of those particular new Avengers were all changed in looks. So that X-23, which is a female version of Wolverine, who is supposed to be his daughter of a sort, created in the same way like Wolverine, she became the new Wolverine and the member of the female Avengers. Well, they were not all females, but one good portion of them, yes. And she's also a member there. And if I'm not mistaken, Iron Man remained to be Tony Stark, although I'm not sure if Pepper Potts wasn't the one to take his place and become a female Iron Man. And another character would be Falcon, who becomes the new Captain America in that group. So everything was changed, I guess, for the fact of starting a completely new idea about Avengers and so forth, what if, fictional story and that sort of thing. Aside from that, I would like to just go back to the figure and say that I like the way this figure came out, even though I'm not sure why was she chosen to be Thor to begin with. Aside from the fact that they say that she was worthy of wielding a hammer, aside from that, I don't know anything else about it until I find out. But it's a very well done figure, and I like a variety among the Asgardian action figures, and we get them very rarely these days because it's usually only Thor in hundreds of different versions, but the other characters don't get as much exposure. So any uh, gods or goddesses from Asgard in a 6-inch Marvel Legends form, I always warmly welcome because I like to see more of them, and I'm still waiting to see the Warriors 3 based on the comics, not on the movie, in a 6-inch form, and I would like to see Executioner, who is a sidekick of Enchantress, an evil goddess from Asgard. I would like to see him, because he is appearing in Thor Ragnarok in the upcoming one. I'd like to see him as a Build-A-Figure in one of the future waves, or at least as a regular figure. Anyway, let's go now to the final figure of this wave, and that would be Hela, the goddess of the underworld in Asgardian mythology, and this is how she looks like. She has a very ornamental and very interesting looking helmet that has all sorts of spikes all over it, and she came with an extra head that shows her without the helmet and with long hair and more human looking. But I do not like to display her with that head, so I keep that particular one aside and I just display her like this because this is her best look. She did come with this sword, which she uses in the movie because this figure is based on the movie, although her appearance with this kind of helmet is also known to be in the cartoons and the comics as well, so it's quite accurate. Now this is how her sword looks like. It's a very strange looking sword that almost looks like well, a part of a very old clock, like a pointy hand, the longer pointing hand. It's very strange looking. I don't know how to describe it. It just doesn't look like your regular Viking or Asgardian blade. It's quite strange altogether. Now, what I found out in some of the comics when I used to read Thor years ago, nothing of the new ones, that she, and according to one of the cartoons, specifically Hulk versus Thor, which was released a couple of years back on a DVD and Blu-ray, it turns that's where she makes an appearance as well, because Loki was asking her help to release the soul of Bruce Banner, whom she claimed when he ended up on Asgard. She appears in that cartoon movie, looking exactly like this, and in that particular animated movie, I had the impression that she is the daughter of Loki. I didn't really know that he has children to begin with, but there was an indication that she is his daughter. Anyway, I find her quite an interesting character due to her appearance in the armor and the fact that she's the goddess of the underworld and she can claim anybody's soul, and she's been trying for a very long time to claim the soul of Thor, and she did not succeed, but of course she never gave up the idea to keep attempting over and over again. She comes with a removable cape that's made of rubbery plastic. She has, again, the usual articulation you would expect. She can do a bit of a split up to that much. She can move her legs forward and a bit backward. Now, one thing that I find rather annoying about Marvel Legends, that's the kind of problem that persisted since the days of Toy Biz making Marvel Legends, is that some of the figures were not molded properly in the sense of quality control. Now, what do I mean specifically by that? Some of the figures, and I just noticed that in Hela, some of the figures have very loose body parts, which is not even noticeable until you open it and you start fiddling around with it. Some body parts are completely loose and they're not properly tightened, which is very annoying, because that shouldn't happen. They should be properly tightened so that there is no looseness to them or anything like that. And only one of her legs seems to be that way. The arms also seem to be rather tight and properly adjusted. She has actually there is no, my mistake. In the case of her, there is no waist articulation, but the upper body. In torso area, yes, there is a movement that she can move left to the right, at least that much, and she can move her head left to the right as well, and she can move her head forward and a bit backward to look up, sort of. And the other hand is molded to just be an outstretched hand, in other words, I guess when she's releasing magic, dark magic out of it. And only one hand, meaning the right one, is molded to hold the sword, so it cannot be held in the other hand. She's able to stand properly as long as the legs are adjusted properly. And she also came with some body pieces to build a Gladiator Hulk. And of course, when you combine the pieces of all 6 figures, then you get a complete Gladiator Hulk. Now, of course, what's worthy to mention is that that Gladiator Hulk was also released by Hasbro in their early waves of the Marvel Legends. And he also looked quite impressive, but more about that when I try to do some comparisons between the old and the new Gladiator Hulks, and that will come when I have some of these guys complete. For the moment, I just have that early version of Gladiator Hulk, but I don't have any of the newer ones just yet. There will be several of him available because of the movie. There will be one, meaning the Build-A-Figure based on the movie, available through completing all the figures and getting all the pieces from this wave. And then there will be at least 2 more from Marvel Select, one based on the movie, one based on the comic books. And there is also a giant 14 inches in size electronic Gladiator Hulk that can talk. So there will be quite a number of versions of him. But anyway, to finish the story, this wave is actually one of the best waves that they made so far. Of course, there is the Netflix wave as well, which I will talk about another time. But the Asgardian wave is very welcome that it made it this far, because, as I already said, the first Thor movie with Chris Hemsworth, who's been playing Thor in part 1, 2, and 3 of Thor, and also been playing Thor in the Avengers as well. We don't have a chance to see Asgardians very often being made into 6-inch, so by part 3 now there has been some effort to put out some of the characters out. There was an exclusive 5-pack of Asgardians made by Hasbro for this year's SDCC convention in California that contained a repainted version of the Unworthy Thor, and of course a slightly different painted version of the Jane Foster as a Thor, and it also contained the King of the Elves, of the Dark Elves, and it also contained the father of Odin, who seems to be this oversized bearded Viking with a shield and some other weapons. I believe his name is Bor. I had no idea that Odin actually had a father, because in the old comics there was no such indication whatsoever, meaning the 1970s, 1980s comic books about Thor. And the final figure available in that 5-pack is Ulik. Ulik is a creature who is extremely powerful, and the most powerful part of him are his fists. He's more like a mixture of an animal and a troll, something in between. It's hard for me to tell, but I do not have that 5-pack, and actually the only figures I would have wanted from that 5-pack would be the King of the Dark Elves and Ulik and the Father of Odin, because the Jane Foster Thor and the Unworthy Thor, I already got him, and I don't really care much for such minor paint details and all that sort of thing. I prefer those 3 characters, but unfortunately they will never be released, it seems, as a single pack figures. So if I didn't get that multi-pack, I guess I will probably not see them, not unless somebody decides to sell them off individually. But I'm glad that I managed to gather at least these guys at retail, so I'm good with that. And I'm looking forward to hopefully Hasbro releasing some more Asgardian themed characters. As I already mentioned earlier, I would like to see the Warriors 3, but not based on the Thor movies, but based on the comic books, meaning in their classic look. And I would love to see Executioner as a Build-A-Figure, and some Frost Giants Build-A-Figures would be nice, at least one, such as Ymir, or Ymir, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, who is the king of the Frost Giants, the largest of them all. And I would like to see any other characters are related to the Asgard and the Asgardian stories. So anyway, with that part, I would like to bring this discussion to a close, and I hope I kept your interest during this video. And if you guys like the video and you would like to see some more in regards to any of the action figures I have, please do press the subscribe button, and I'll catch you guys next time. Thank you. Bye.